it's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to the Hockey News Big Show. I'm your host, Katie Gaus, joined by my co-host, Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy. Hope everybody had a lovely St. Patrick's Day. I'm still wearing my green, and I loved seeing Toronto in their St. Pat's jerseys last night. Those are always the fun ones because we don't really get to see different jerseys anymore, right? Because they're not like allowed to wear them all the time. So I'm always excited when we get those different jersey nights. All right, let's talk a little bit about this run that we are on. 1 month remaining in the regular season, and the points obviously mean more. Every single night, the standings are going to change. Teams are going to be in, then they're going to be out. But one of the teams right now that is on a nice run is the Ottawa Senators. Big sweep in the Battle of Ontario over the Leafs in that final meeting of the regular season. They're on a 6-game win streak. They've got a big game coming up against Montreal. I want to just talk a little bit about why this team maybe feels like this is different and that they are hitting their stride at the most important time. And we think that things are going to be different this year. So what, in your opinion, I mean, we can talk about Dylan Cousins, we can talk about some of the goaltending that they've been getting, but what in each of your guys' opinions is the driving force behind Ottawa's success right now? We'll start with you, Michael.
I think it comes down to, forget about X's and O's. I think it's really just in a belief. And, I was at the game on Saturday. It's funny enough, Ottawa had everyone there. And I mean everyone. Like Michael Anlauer, the owner, was at the rink. So was Steve Staios, Dave Poulin, part of their management core. But there really is just a feeling like this year is different. And I think it comes down to the goaltending, Katie. Like, having Linus Ullmark back there, a big game goalie, a guy that's been in the playoffs numerous times with the Boston Bruins. He was saying that, they're on a 6-game heater. He goes, normally it would be like, all right, 6 games, we're happy with that. He's like, no, we want 7, then we want 8, then we want 9. And then when we do lose, we don't want to go on another losing streak. So I think, it's a different kind of feeling around that Sens team, a little bit more mature, a little bit more experienced. And, hopefully this is the year that they do it, because I'm getting kind of tired of just saying the same old things like Buffalo, get it together, Detroit, come on, make the playoffs, and same thing with Ottawa. So we'll see if it actually happens.
I like it. It does feel different, and I think that's noticeable, and it's great to hear what's going on inside that room as well. What do you see, Ryan?
Well, one thing that's very interesting is that defensively as a team, Ottawa's a lot better this year than they had been in the recent past. So you got to give some credit to Coach Travis Green, where, he's putting trust into players like Ridley Gregg and Shane Pinto in terms of the forwards. And, just as a group, they're defending a lot better. They used to be either, one of the worst or kind of like bottom 10. Now they have a chance to be top 10 in goals against. So that's a pretty dramatic turnaround. And when you think about, adding Ullmark in net, and you think about the continued maturation of Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle, like all the big guns up front, that whole core, Jake Sanderson, beginning to get into his prime. I mean, he's still got a whole bunch of years, but it's all kind of coming together. And, I think having those elements and not just relying on, hot goal scorers or a hot goaltender, they've really kind of put it all together.
Yeah. And I think another thing too, and this is kind of a little bit about what both of you had touched on, is that these are players that, when it started out, there was excitement about the group when they were younger and they had a lot of potential, but now they're still that potential, but they also have experience. And every year that they haven't made it is a year that they've probably learned something from it. You add in, a new coach that's really making a difference, like you mentioned, Ryan. So it's a lot to keep track of with them, because again, I feel like we have good moments and then we have bad, but I like the fact that they aren't just settling for a 6-game streak, and that if they do lose a game, they're not going to go back on this spiral. And I think that Ullmark has brought a really good mentality with him on top of his goaltending. So the question now becomes, do they, and again, it's exciting. We want them in the playoffs and they have a good spot for that. Is there any chance we can see them creeping their way in to the top 3, getting into that 3rd spot? Because obviously Toronto and Tampa, both with around 6 points lead, but there are games in hand. It would be kind of crazy to think about them getting in there. What do you guys think about their chances of maybe pushing? Because they do have, I think, an easier schedule down the stretch.
Yeah, I could see it happening. They're not too far out. That being said, I really want to see Florida against Ottawa. I want to see Kachuk against
Yeah,
Kachuk. Like
true.
as much as a Battle of Ontario would be just amazing. We'll keep that for the second round, maybe. But yeah,
That's right.
Kachuk brothers going at it. Oh boy, like that's probably what all the schedule makers want right now.
That's must-see TV.
Yeah, Katie, you mentioned the schedule. I think they have 2 more matchups against the Sabres. I think they played Columbus 3 times, and Columbus is also battling for a wild
Yeah.
card spot, so they're not an also ran by any stretch of the imagination. But it's not like you have to play like Colorado 3 times or something like that. I don't think they're going to catch Toronto and Tampa. The Leafs snapped their skid against Calgary the other night in very emphatic fashion.
Yes.
And Tampa Bay's playing pretty well. But I do think that Ottawa's going to be in a good spot rolling into the playoffs. Like they're feeling good right now, and as you said, they're putting a lot of wins together.
Yeah, positioning aside, I feel like it's kind of the mentality, the vibe, the feeling they carry, and they're in a good spot right now. Okay, well, you just mentioned the Leafs and that emphatic win over the Calgary Flames. It was a good one. But the bigger conversation, despite the fact that they did snap that skid, which is a good thing, and fans can stop fully breaking down for at least a few minutes, is this conversation around Auston Matthews, and is he truly healthy? He scored 2 goals, had an assist, so a great game in the win over Calgary. But again, the concerns are just that he looks off and he's not himself. We obviously know his production isn't what we typically expect. So what do you guys get the sense is going on there? Is there anything going on with the Leafs captain? And if so, how concerned should fans be?
There's definitely something going on. I
Okay.
suspect it's a lower body injury just based on how he's skating.
Yeah.
He's not the same dynamic player. And, again, I was at the game against Calgary and he scores twice, both
Yeah.
on the power play, both times basically stationary, where, is there a better guy at, shooting the puck than Auston Matthews? Probably not. But right now, it's just skating's not there.
Yeah.
It's tough. If Toronto was basically, where Washington is right now and really secure in that top spot, I would suspect that Auston Matthews would be out of the lineup and then would be getting some rest, similar to, I guess, what Matthew Tkachuk is getting right now. And they'd probably just say, shut it down. We'll see you basically for the final couple games of the regular season or even for game 1 of the playoffs. But fact of the matter is Toronto needs him, and they need an Auston Matthews, even if he's at maybe 60 or 70%, because as we saw, like even that version of Auston Matthews can still score. But it will be concerning if this doesn't go away and the Leafs are looking at an injured Matthews for the playoffs.
Yeah. Ryan, what do you think? I mean, is there a case to be made that they truly can't finish this without him, that he has to stay in there and stick it out? And what are your thoughts on the idea of, like, could they pull off shutting him down even a little bit? Maybe they get a tiny lead. What do you see?
I could see them, sort of picking their spots. And, I don't know how many back-to-backs Toronto has the rest of the way out, but, maybe it's a matter of, if they do have a couple, and it's like, okay, well, maybe he only plays 1 and he rests. Maybe if there's a short road trip of a game or 2, they say just hang back in Toronto, get treatment. Because I agree with Mike, like something's wrong with him. You look at the stats in terms of like rush chances and what he's doing in that regard, and even his top speed, it's not what it was in the past. So, clearly something is there that's causing him to labor a bit. And I do think you'll get to the point where they say, okay, can we catch Florida for first place in the division? If not, how much of a difference is home ice advantage against Tampa Bay? Like there's going to be some calculations to be done where it's like, and let's face it, I mean, they can win with him out of the lineup. I mean, it's a very good lineup to begin with. But I think there will be some calculations of, okay, well, we have to make sure that he is as good as possible for game 1 of the playoffs. So what does that mean?
Right. Yeah. I mean, because that is what it's all about. It's just been interesting to watch because it's like even in a game where he does get the 2 goals and he's still excellent. It's just That's not the Auston Matthews that we know, that we love, that is exciting, that just kind of jumps off of your screen. So it's all about the playoffs this year for Toronto. So maybe it does become a decision where it's like, we need him to be ready then much more than we need to get second place over third. But we'll see. All right. The Carolina Hurricanes have been getting it done in a big way since the Mikko Rantanen trade, drama, everything at the deadline ended. So 4-0 since the deadline. They lead the NHL in goals 4 per game. They're giving up just over 1 goal against per game. So really good on both sides of it there. Why are the Canes now rolling despite not really being a better team than they probably were prior to these trades? And more importantly, can this last?
Yeah. I mean, they're a really good team.
Yeah.
And they always have been. I think the Rantanen thing was a bit of a distraction, and he clearly wasn't comfortable in the lineup, even though his possession numbers were good. The points weren't actually there, but they're well coached with Rod Brind'Amour. My only concern is, are they still a regular season team? And I mean, they're getting contributions throughout the lineup. They're Pyotr Kochetkov was excellent net the other night for them. Had a shutout against the Flyers. My only concern, it's the concern I've had for years now, is if you're in the playoffs and you need a goal, like in the last minute of a game, who's the guy?
Yeah.
I think at one point we thought it might be Andrei Svechnikov, but he's kind of taken a step back.
Yeah.
Is it Sebastian Aho? Is he the kind of guy that can do it all himself? Is it somebody like Seth Jarvis, or even a young guy like Jackson Blake, who kind of surprises? Jackson Blake actually has a history of scoring incredibly clutch goals dating back to his Minnesota high school days.
All right.
So, I mean, that's kind of interesting.
The
But
unlikely hero.
that would be my concern with Carolina, is that they're more of a regular season powerhouse than they are a playoff team.
Yeah, and it has felt like that before, and that was what we were like, oh, well, Natchez is having a great year, and then he could be the game breaker, and then obviously getting Mikko, you think that, and it never came to fruition. But I do agree. It's just like, it feels like they're exciting and they're solid, but they're not playoff, like, dangerous. I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
I think the Rantanen debacle might be the best thing to happen to the Canes. Like, they are a team that somehow plays better when they have this us against them mentality. And it goes back to when Don Cherry was ripping them. Yeah, like the Storm Surge and calling them a bunch of jerks. Like, this is a team that kind of likes to play with a bit of a chip on his shoulder. And it might go back to the coach and, how Rod Brind'Amour coaches these guys. I don't know. Like, Ryan, you mentioned a lot of names there in terms of game breakers, like whether it's Jarvis, Aho, Svechnikov, even Jackson Blake. That's a lot of players that can be. Yeah, that's
but
not
who's
a bad
the guy?
Who's going to do it?
It could be one guy one game, one guy another game. Like,
it's Mark
Jankowski. They haven't done it, but it's also a team that's gone to the conference final numerous times. Like, they're no slouch when it comes to regular season versus playoffs. I get it. You'd love to have a Connor McDavid there, or a guy that can just take over a game. But it's like you mentioned, it's still a dangerous team. I think for me, what it's really going to come down to is the goaltending. Like, is Freddie Anderson going to be healthy? And if he can't get the job done, is a Kochetkov.
Yeah.
Well, is he ready?
It's always the question.
Yeah, like same questions, I guess, a lot of teams are having, like Toronto, like when you're putting your faith in Joseph Wall. Kochetkov, is he the guy? Like, at times he looks like he's going to be the guy just because he's been leaned on, but we don't know if he can be the guy that's going to carry them, similar to what some teams have been getting out of their young goalies. So there's still a lot of question marks there.
That's fair. And again, Freddie Anderson is always a question mark with the health. It's the same conversation. Ottawa's still like, we need Linus Ullmark to stay healthy and be the healthy guy for a change too. Like, he's battled through it. So that's always, I mean, goaltending in the playoffs. If you don't have a guy, then don't expect to be there for very long. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about some front office chatter. On Saturday, Elliot Friedman reporting on Hockey Night in Canada that the Florida Panthers are starting their conversations again with pending UFA Sam Bennett. Obviously, we've heard his name thrown around a lot. Then he has that great game against Toronto. We start hearing all the talk about, oh man, what a great fit he would be, what he could bring to the Leafs. So what do we think about the idea of what Sam Bennett could do for Toronto? But more importantly, would the Leafs be able to swing keeping him and Marner, or is this going to have to come down to being a decision there? Like, what kind of decisions would they have to make if that's a player they're genuinely interested in?
Well, what's Bennett going to get this summer? That's the big question mark.
That's
Like,
fair too.
I know there's value in guys that can play with some grit. And I think what Bennett did at the Four Nations and also what he did in the final really kind of shone a light on the kind of player he is. I would put him at 8 million in the open market. I don't know if that's too little, if that's too much, but there's not a whole lot of players that you really match him up against in terms of salary wise, where you're going, okay, here's a comparable. And especially this summer, he's going to be going up against maybe a Mitch Marner on the open market, completely different players. So I don't think it's an apples to apples kind of thing. For me, I think it's either Marner or Bennett. If you don't get Marner, you better get Bennett. And if you get Marner, I don't think you can afford to keep, even if you say Tavares is going out the door, because, I think Bennett's, if he goes to Toronto, it's whatever I said, 8 million, it's probably going to be 10 million then.
Well, yeah, it'll be way more up there. I think in Florida, I would actually, if he stays, will be less, but they're good at kind of structuring their contracts in a way that, they keep the guy and it also makes sense for both parties. What do you think, Ryan?
Well, I do think that Sam Bennett's going to cash in this summer. It's kind of remarkable. You think about what he's accomplished in Florida, and if I'm not mistaken, he's making less than $5 million a year on his current contract. And he's never made more than $5 million in his NHL career, dating back to Calgary. So I think, at his age, this is the time where it's like, okay, statement contract, like I'm a Stanley Cup winner. I'm a Four Nations gold medalist. I've proven my worth. So I agree with Mike that, like 8 million is a totally reasonable price. And if I'm Bennett, I'm saying, I want 8 times 7 or at least 8 times 6. So, for me, I think the Leafs, and again, it depends on what happens in the playoffs, but do you try to run it all back again next year and say, okay, Marner and Tavares, we're just going to re-sign our own guys. We like what we have. Or do you go the other direction and say, we need a big shakeup in our top 6? Could you go instead with a combination of, say, Sam Bennett and Nikolai Ehlers, who is a UFA out of Winnipeg, who is probably himself looking at about 8 million, maybe a bit more, because I think he's making somewhere around 6 right now. I don't think you can do both. I think maybe you could swing Marner and Bennett, but it's not likely. And obviously, if you do that, you're not re-signing Tavares because you only have so many slots and you only have so much cap space.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I mean, again, bottom line, when it comes to anything with Leafs contract decisions or roster management, it is all going to depend on what happens in the playoffs. But that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Well, something else we've been watching is the NHL GM meetings. They began on Monday. Obviously, lots of topics and rules are being discussed. We've heard a ton already about the goalie interference reviews and challenges in that. But which topic that is up for discussion, or we've kind of heard rumored will be talked about, maybe it's a rule change, are you guys most interested, Ryan?
So for me, I'm very interested in what they do, or at least what they talk about in terms of CHL, NCAA, how it relates to contracts, because now we're in a new world, right? You can play CHL and you can play NCAA. The barriers have come down, but there are some interesting, little things there where, if you draft a player and they play CHL, you have 2 years to sign them. If they play NCAA, you essentially have 4 years. And, there's some exceptions if they leave school early and things like that. But for the sake of argument, it's 4 years. So what happens now if you draft a major junior player and then a year later they go NCAA?
Right.
You can't sign them within those 2 years because then they're not allowed to play NCAA anymore. So do you get like 1 year plus 4 years to sign that player? These are questions that it's a CBA thing, but it has to be answered. The other thing that's come up, and this is something that I've heard from USHL execs, is that the NHL wants to bring the USHL under the same rules as major junior. Now, do they literally become part of the CHL, or is it just a matter of now you can have stipends? Now the development money from NHL draft picks goes to USHL teams instead of USA Hockey. That to me is a fascinating Pandora's box.
We could have an entire episode where we just went over the different nuances that they're currently facing because of this changeover and because of this league. And I mean, I hear it every day with things that are happening around college hockey and the challenges that they're facing where they're trying to bring in kids who have been getting money for being in major junior. And now they're going to get scholarships in college. And how does that work out? Because those kids earned that money there, but they don't. Did the teams get to keep it? It's genuinely something we could talk about for hours. But all right, Michael, what do you have your eye on from the GM meetings?
Yeah, that trickle down effect. Oh my God, it affects so many facets that you don't even think about. That's really interesting, Ryan. The one rule change that got brought up, and it gets brought up probably every year, was the get rid of the shootout, extend the overtime, the 3-on-3 from 5 minutes to 10 minutes, kind of similar to what we saw at the Four Nations.
Right.
Unfortunately, that got shut down once again, and it always gets shut down, probably because guys like Erik Karlsson always complain that they don't want to be on the ice for, any much longer than 5 minutes. The fact of the matter is most games do end within first 2 minutes of overtime. So we are seeing less and less of the shootout, but oh boy, can you imagine if we just got rid of the shootout completely and just went to a 10-minute 3-on-3 overtime? Like, that's what everyone wants, right?
Yes. It's a completely selfish thing from a fan perspective, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, who says no to that? And then you think about it and you're like, oh, all of the star players that have to play for an entire 10 minutes, essentially, because they're just getting put out every other shift. And ultimately, if you're doing that a lot throughout the course of a season, if you're a team that goes to overtime quite frequently, that's a ton of extra wear and tear on your best players. Like, someone brought up Quinn Hughes and how much he already has to do. Like that guy would never even be allowed to get off the ice. Like, that's not good for him. He's already trying to stay healthy. So yes, it's definitely a conversation where we all would love to see it, but we all kind of also understand why it doesn't make sense. All right, let's talk about these races in the East and the West. Starting off with our West, we've got the Blues, the Canucks, the Flames, the Utah Hockey Club. Everything's getting interesting for their final wild card spot. Calgary with some games in hand. The Blues have been heating up, but they're 7-2-1 in their last 10. Vancouver is interesting again. Which team are you making a case for to snag the second wild card spot, but with the thought in mind that this is the team you think would be the toughest matchup for Winnipeg, who is ultimately going to face this team? What do you think?
I'm going to go St. Louis in the West.
Okay.
I always tell Ryan, like, the one thing I look at when we're looking at the standings is goal differential, and it's rare. It happens every year, like one or two teams, but generally speaking, if you got a positive goal differential, you're a playoff team. And St. Louis right now is stuck at they're at 0. So they got a leg up on some of the teams that they're battling. And they also got Jordan Binnington. And if there's one thing that can really kind of foil Winnipeg's plans, it could be just a hot goalie. And if Binnington plays the way he did at the Four Nations, and he plays the way that he did in 2019 when St. Louis won the cup, then teams are going to have a handful with that team.
Yeah, a Hellebuck versus Binnington battle would certainly be fun to watch as well. All right, Ryan, which team do you kind of have your eye on for that final spot?
I'm looking at the Vancouver Canucks, and it was a lot of doom and gloom for a long time there, but it feels like they've turned a corner. I've watched a surprising number of Canucks games recently.
Why?
Given that they're West Coast. I've been staying up late. Elias Pettersson's playing a lot better, and he's cashing in, and I think that's huge for them. And then, Mike, you make a point about goaltending. Kevin Lankinen. It's funny. It's like I love Thatcher Demko. I've been a big Demko supporter for years. Obviously, injuries have taken a toll on his career, but Kevin Lankinen has been great for Vancouver on most nights. And if you talk about experience, he had a great run with Finland at the World Championships a few years ago. So he's been in those pressure situations. And obviously we saw him at the Four Nations as well with Finland. So I think Lankinen could surprise, and you talk about, matching up with Winnipeg. Vancouver, I mean, they've got those big guns, right? They've got Pettersson, Katie, you talked about Quinn Hughes and how much he plays.
Yes.
And then if you get like Kevin Lankinen on a heater in net, then that's not going to be fun for the Jets.
Even Besser, like, he's playing for a contract. Right. Like, that's some motivation right there.
There you go.
Yeah, it would definitely be an interesting story if not only could they, I mean, they want to hang on, but if they could turn it around to the point that despite some of the negative, more than negative storylines they've had to deal with this year, they could get at least that positive out of it. I like it both. And again, common theme, and we'll probably see this in the next question as well. But if you're going to have a team that causes any kind of an upset or a stir in the first round, it's usually going to have a big part from goaltending. So let's talk about that on the side for the East. So plenty of drama there as well. The Rangers are now back in a wild card spot, but they have got a tough schedule ahead of them. They play 2 more games against Tampa, a game against Florida, a game against Toronto. They still have to go on their West Coast road trip, which just is taxing and just isn't fun, even if the teams aren't always a huge challenge. Montreal's been on fire, 7-1-2 in their last 10. Columbus is still in the mix. They need to pick it up. They've been slipping more than anyone lately. So which team do we want to see earning this final spot? Because they will be the most interesting fight in the first round.
I really want Columbus, and I don't know if they're going to be an interesting one. I just, my heart goes out to that franchise, obviously with what happened in the summer. And it's just, Don Waddell's done all the right things there. I hope, I don't know when Sean Monahan is due back. I don't know if any of you know, like if it's any day now or whatever, but I imagine when he does come back, it'll be a huge boost. But even without him in the lineup, the Blue Jackets have been really holding their own. And again, they're -5 goal differential. So they're not quite as bad as those other teams that they're kind of battling there.
And they have been playing their last couple games without Elvis Merzlikins. He was away from the team for personal reasons. His wife was having a baby. So, I mean, they had Jet Greaves in net, and he still, held his own to a good extent against that game against New Jersey. So it's a story that for sure is like a personal interest one, especially. Knows what they could do. Like Monahan getting back in there is a big wild card. All right, Ryan, which team is your pick for just actually being able to maybe do a little bit of damage and cause some problems?
I'm looking at the New York Rangers, and this is a team that we expected to be like a lock for the playoffs before the season began. Yeah, I mean, they won the President's Trophy last year, and the roster's not that dramatically different. You look at the big guns they have: Panarin, Shesterkin, Adam Fox. I know he's on the shelf now, but I think he'll be back soon. JT Miller coming in. Like, you want that star power in the playoffs, and I mean, Washington has been a high-flying team, full points to the Capitals. They've succeeded on many levels already this season. But if you wanted like an actual good matchup and not just like cannon fodder in the first round, for me, it's the New York Rangers. I think Montreal, I mean, that would be a pretty fun story, especially because, Montreal, I mean, I guess I'm old and it has been a while now, but let's not forget when Yaroslav Halak was backstopping the Habs and they upset Ovechkin and Washington in the playoffs all those years ago. So there's a little bit of history between those two franchises. But I do think the Rangers would be a team where you could say, all right, well, this will be a series.
Yeah, I mean, you have Igor Shesterkin, and whenever he decides to just shut the door and be that guy, and you're giving your team a huge chance to cause problems for basically anybody in the league that you're facing, not just the Capitals. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll keep track of all these races. And obviously on our Friday show, we will update who our top 8 cup contenders are after this week of action. But listen up, hockey players, you don't need to drop a fortune on sticks. You can snag a pro level composite stick at stix.com. That is STIX.com. So make sure you head over there, check it out, see what they got to offer. Let's get to some rapid fire. We saw William Nylander scoring goal number 38 for Toronto in that game over Calgary. So can he hit 50? Yes or no?
Yeah, he'll hit 50. Pretty remarkable. This is his 3rd year. He'll hit 40 in a row. So really just such a productive, consistent scorer. And he's been the guy that's carried the offense from a goal standpoint all season long. So, whether the team's going or not, William Nylander seems to find the back of the net. So for sure, I'm saying 50.
I like it.
I'm going to say no. I think he'll probably get close, but it just feels like there's not enough games remaining for him to do it. But I will say I appreciate William Nylander on an extra level because he is one of the only Toronto players that refuses to do drop passes, which is the bane of my existence. Like Nylander holds on to the puck. He brings it into the zone. He forces teams to follow him around, and that's how you should do it. He wants the puck. I appreciate that. Please, everybody stop making drop passes. Everybody knows it's coming.
This is a PSA against drop passes.
This has been my TED Talk.
Stop ruining Ryan's life.
Not everyone can carry the puck like Nylander, though, Ryan. That is the issue.
Also a good
I
point.
suppose so, but I mean, some of them could, and they choose not to.
Sure.
We're hearing the argument too this year, like what, like guys scoring this number of goals has been more impressive because scoring has been down. And it's like Draisaitl already has the Rocket locked up because it's not even close. But I think Nylander is actually second. So there's a huge drop off in general in like the number of 40 or 50 goal scorers that we're seeing. So kudos to him for keeping it going consistently at his level. All right. The San Jose Sharks are the first team to be officially eliminated from the playoffs. The NHL actually started putting an E next to the team now, which I have not seen before. Instead of like just the X, they got an E, so they're in trouble. The Blackhawks are most likely the team that's going to be next. Which team has more to be optimistic about looking towards next season, Ryan?
Oh, I say San Jose by quite a wide margin because even when they've lost games recently, they've at least been in them. And you can sort of tell, like with more experience, like when they lost to Winnipeg, I guess it was a week or two ago, they've been leading 1-0 basically the whole game. And, they blew it in extra time. But, it was Winnipeg. It was a very good team. And I love Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith. Just the experience they've gotten in their rookie years has been fantastic. And it also feels like they've got the veterans to steer those guys along. The fact that Tyler Toffoli had a sleepover with Celebrini and Will Smith after they all scored in the game, that's like the best thing in the world. And a guy like Tyler Toffoli, having him, on the team for, not only this year, but for the coming years as well, I think that's just going to make a huge difference in building up a new culture with this new wave of Sharks.
Yeah, I love it. It's fun to watch them.
It's hard to argue what you against what you said there, Ryan, but I'm going to try to make a case for Chicago. I actually do believe San Jose right now has more reasons to be optimistic. The one thing I'll say about Chicago is they got rid of Taylor Hall. They got rid of Seth Jones. Let's see who they bring in this summer because that's where things can really kind of change. And I don't have a whole lot of faith in Kyle Davidson because he doesn't seem to be bringing in the right type of veterans, but he does have cap space. And there are some interesting pieces around, like, would they be in the mix for a Sam Bennett? Could they come out of nowhere and get a Mitch Marner? That would give me optimism in Chicago. Chances are, though, they're probably going to roll it back with a lot of young guys, and it's still going to be a miserable year. But that's the one caveat.
Yeah, the only faith I have, though, for Davidson is he did bring in Spencer Knight, who's my favorite goalie of all time. Okay. So I will root for them because Spencer is there. All right, how about this? Bigger surprise. Elias Pettersson, 4 goals in his last 6 games. Or Mark Jankowski, 4 goals in his first 4 games as a member of the Hurricanes. Not sure we saw that one coming. Which one are we surprised by?
It's Pettersson because he's been just awful this year. So you could have said 4 goals for Pettersson. Don't even tell me how many games it took, and I'd be like, that's awesome. He's finally scoring. Like, this guy's just been so bad. So I'm just going to leave it as Pettersson. It's about time that he's actually playing at his level.
That is fair when you consider how much money he's making. 4 goals is the beyond bare minimum, but we'll take it as a step forward. All right, what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I'll go Mark Jankowski just to mix it up because Pettersson should be scoring all the time. But with Jankowski, I think it just proves, what a well-oiled machine Carolina is. They're kind of plug and play up front where, we've talked about the depth they have. And all those weapons, for a guy that, a first round draft pick whose development was probably pushed forward a little too quickly initially in his career. It's nice to see Mark Jankowski find his range with a new team and to find it quickly and to be a contributor.
I like it. It's a good testament to the depth that they have, but it is fun when you just get those stories that pop out and you're like, wait, who's doing the best since the trade deadline? Oh, I love it. Perfect. Good to
Yeah.
see it. All right. Well, the PWHL once again broke an all-time American pro women's hockey attendance record. They had a crowd of 14,288, and this is the second time in a row, second straight year that it's been in Detroit where they broke this U.S. women's hockey attendance record. So 2 years in a row, we're seeing it. They hit their 1 million fans, I believe, with tickets sold, which is a huge milestone for the league as well. But should Detroit, with this kind of consistent success now, be really considered a heavy favorite if they're choosing a team in the U.S. for some expansion?
It's Hockey Town, USA, Katie. Like,
There
what
it
else do we have
is.
to say? And they were chanting, "We want a team." Like, I just think
Yeah.
it's really cool that so many markets are just clamoring for
Yeah.
a team. It's great that it's not just the leagues going, "All right, we're going to go here, we're going to go there." We don't
Mhm.
know if it's going to be successful. We got our fingers crossed. At least here, it's like, they're knocking down the door. Please give us a team. And it's not just Detroit, it's Pittsburgh. There's so many markets that are just, they want a team and they want one right now. So yeah, Detroit should be one of the favorites at least.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, geographically it makes sense because it's close to Toronto. It's a little bit closer for Minnesota to get to than some of their other opponents. Here's the interesting thing for me. Right now, the state of Michigan doesn't have any Division I women's college hockey teams, which
Very
is like
true.
mind-blowing because I think there's like 7 men's teams.
Yeah.
There's been talk about the University of Michigan Wolverines looking into it, so that's positive. But I
Yeah.
think what the PWHL has shown is that like this is long overdue in the state. Like there's clearly
Yeah.
a hunger for women's hockey at a high level in Michigan. So it's time for college teams to step up, and it's got to be at least one women's team in the next couple of years. And if the PWHL can help spark that, it's weird. It's kind of the cart before the horse. Like it
Mhm.
would make more sense to have a college team before
Yeah.
a pro team. But if it takes a pro team coming in to get a college team, then hey, I'm not going to complain.
It's really interesting too because you're right, and it's kind of like we think about Michigan like from a men's standpoint. It's like, oh yeah, like they've got such a big footprint in the college space. Obviously, from the youth hockey level, they've got teams all over the place for AAA, and that's the same is true for the women's side. So for there to be just like every good women's player is coming out of Michigan and going somewhere else for college,
Mm.
that's fascinating, and it is
Yeah.
interesting, and maybe that can be the difference the PWHL can make it. I do love the fact that they are taking the opportunity, with their expansion to have this takeover tour to really get an idea to kind of see the appetite of these different cities. Like it's almost like I wish the NHL could just like pop up rinks in different markets and be like, how would this perform? Like we're just curious. Like here we are in Kansas City or Atlanta again,
Right.
wherever we go, just to really know what you're getting beforehand. But I mean, there's other ways they do their research. We know that they're usually pretty good about it. All right. Last one for us. This one's my favorite because the Happy Gilmore 2 trailer is out. The movie is set to release on July 25th of this summer. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you guys to see this movie? And maybe it's way more me, but I'm
Yeah.
excited.
I'm gonna be disappointing to you, Katie. I'm probably like at a 1 or a 2 right now, and
Get out.
that's
Get
based
out.
on too much time has passed between the original and this one, which is always like alarm bells should go off. The other
Yeah.
one is, name me like the last Adam Sandler movie that made you laugh, and it's been a while
Oh,
for me. Like he's had some stinkers. Okay,
Mm.
Grown Ups 2. I don't know if there's a Grown Ups 3, but there probably is, and it's awful. But I can't remember the last time Adam Sandler made an actual good comedy. He's been in some good dramas, but comedy, he's just not there anymore. Sorry.
Mm.
I'm just
I
so
didn't mind Grown
nostalgic.
Ups Infinity War. That was pretty good. No. I'm gonna go 7 because
Mm.
I'm cautiously optimistic. Like I watched the teaser trailer and it's like Shooter McGavin's back and
Yep.
like, the Ben Stiller character's back. A lot of the original cast are there. I think it could just be a nice sort of nostalgia run. And
Yeah.
because I'm old and the nostalgia is aimed at me and my generation, I'm going to say that's like, yeah, my expectations aren't high where I expect it to be groundbreaking. I think I just want to, see some of those jokes and storylines,
Mhm.
updated and
Yeah.
with a little twist and, go back and hang out with those characters one more time. So I'm
Yeah.
7 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I have to preface it by saying, because my excitement is not based on the fact that I'm like, I can't wait for this to be one of the best movies of the summer. Like, this is going to be so good. I am excited about it because it's just happening again, because it's one of my favorite movies ever. So when they make another one, you're just excited because, again, there is the carryover of the characters. There's going to be similar jokes. There's just going to be things that I enjoy. I think it's very much nostalgia driven. I like everything Adam Sandler does. Even if it's not good, I'll watch it because I enjoy him. But again, I do think there's going to be moments in the movie that maybe the movie as a whole is a stinker, but there's going to be moments in that movie that I think are going to be awesome. Just like throwback, kind of like, wow, yeah, like that's great. Look how old these guys are now, and it's still fun and it's still great. So I'm very excited about it. That's how I started my day. I watched the trailer a couple times. So
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being the killjoy. I just
Michael,
remember Slapshot Part 2, and it was just so bad.
listen, I know. Well, I mean, they made the new Gladiator, and that was absolutely
Joker 2, even like,
yeah. It
not
just
every movie needs a sequel. Okay.
totally agree. But this one,
Yeah.
it's like I'm not wanting it because I want them to make another good movie. It's been a minute. I like these guys. Let's see what they
Yeah.
put together. It's fun. It's on Netflix. So, all right, guys. Well, that does it for this episode of the Hockey News Big Show. Make sure, as always, to tune in and join us on social media to see what we're talking about. And every Friday now, we've got our top 8 list. So we will update that, see if anybody has moved up or down the list for who our guys think are going to win this Stanley Cup. All right. That does it, though, for Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy. I'm Katie Gaus. Thanks for watching, and we will see you all on Friday.